On Wednesday, the new iPad Pro with the M4 chip came out, and I got it on day one. So after using this iPad, here are my first thoughts on the device. The first thing that is noticeable is the thinness, because this iPad is really thin. It's a noticeable difference from the last generation iPad Pros, and I think that this is a good change since it differentiates the iPad from the MacBook even more. While some people have been concerned about bending, I don't think that this will be an issue for most people who use a case. I have had a couple old generation iPad Pros bend on me, but my M2 iPad Pro never bent. I also noticed some small design changes, such as there being a microphone in place of what used to be the SIM ejection slot on the cellular models. I believe the microphone is there on the Wi-Fi models as well. There used to be two microphones at the top of the iPad Pro, but now there's only one microphone centered at the top. Apple also removed the microphone on the left of the iPad. On the cellular models, there are no longer any millimeter wave antennas, and apparently the entire millimeter wave 5G technology has been excluded completely from the new iPad Pros and the new iPad Airs, I believe, as well. The OLED display is a big upgrade this year, and while it's going to be nice to not see a blooming effect over black backgrounds, I still think that Mini LED was a great technology, maybe not as good as OLED though. It makes sense as to why Apple switched to OLED, and I think that one of the biggest downsides to Mini LED is how it was somewhat software dependent. The colors on the OLED display are great, and this is definitely one of the best screens on the market now that Apple has incorporated it into the iPad Pro. The display feels a lot more responsive than the LCD and Mini LED displays did. The overall experience of using this iPad is a lot better now that the display resembles more of an iPhone than an iPad. It's also nice to see how the smaller 11-inch iPad Pro got a major display upgrade since it did not get the Mini LED panel that was reserved for the bigger iPad Pros only. Another upgrade compared to the last generation of iPads is the storage. 256GB base storage is finally here, and it makes the iPad feel a little bit more like a computer now that the storage size has been upgraded. New to the iPad Pros is the front-facing camera and Face ID hardware being positioned on the top when the iPad is being held horizontally. This was a change that I wanted to see come to the new iPad Pros when I saw it on the 10th gen iPads, and now that they're incorporating this design into the rest of the iPads, I think that it's a big change that I personally really like. Apple did remove the wide-angle camera, but I don't think that it's the worst thing they could have done, as I don't think that a lot of people really need a good camera system on the iPad, and I don't really miss it at all actually. With that said, the camera on this iPad actually seems to perform a bit better than last year's iPad Pro. Even while being in the same nowadays small camera cutout, I like the aluminum housing around the camera as it just makes the iPad look a little nicer in general. I'd compare it closer to the matte glass on the base model iPhone's camera than aluminum, as it actually looks a little different than the standard aluminum on the iPad itself. Battery life seems to last a bit longer than the M2 iPad Pros, although my old iPad Pro 12.9 inches battery health was at 94%, I believe, so it was somewhat degraded. One note that I have is that Apple finally added a battery health tab to the new iPads, but only on the new iPad Pro and the new iPad Air. It does not come to the old iPads. Apple has yet to launch a new M series chip primarily on an iPad, but the M4 has finally done that, and this is one of the few times where benchmarks do translate into real-world performance, as everything on this iPad feels faster than my M2 iPad Pro did or my iPhone 15 Pro. Apps feel much more responsive, it takes much less time to open up apps, and the entire experience feels closer to a Mac now than an iPad. With that said, iOS still limits the iPad from reaching its maximum potential, but the hardware is definitely there at this point. I also got the new Magic Keyboard case, and it's a big upgrade in its own right. The new aluminum palm rest makes it feel a lot higher quality, and it just feels like this case will last a lot longer than the last generation Magic Keyboard cases did, build quality wise and even hardware wise. The inclusion of the haptic trackpad now means that every Pro Apple device has a solid-state trackpad. The keys feel a lot nicer now too, and it feels closer to an actual laptop keyboard, a good laptop at that, than a tablet keyboard. Apple also managed to make this case even thinner. Holding it actually makes the entire iPad feel more portable. I can't find a single feature that has been removed from this case compared to last generation, as it still has the USB-C port on the side, although it is thinner now, and they've even added a new function row, which I really like. It's something that I wanted to see from the Magic Keyboard case since it came out in 2020. Something else to note, this iPad feels a lot more bottom heavy when using this in the Magic Keyboard case. This is a good thing because the old iPads just felt really top heavy, and honestly sometimes tapping the screen too hard could result in the iPad tipping over. But what I'll end this video off by saying is that this is a pretty big upgrade for the iPads. It's definitely worth upgrading to. even from a newer iPad Pro. And I don't know when Apple will announce new iPads next, but it might not be for another 2 calendar years. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and with that said, goodbye.